Welcome to the Mainline Podcast. I am Adam Jacquez, along with conference mates Tyler Burton and Corbin Polson. We have taken a week from last, and there's been some reshuffling in the landscape of college football. Before we get into that, guys, how are we doing?
I'm good, guys. Had a good 4th of July. Got to go back down to East Texas for a few days and see some old friends and play a lot of golf and eat some really good food. It was nice to get back down to Tyler, a place I grew up and lived there for 20 years. So good to kind of check out the hometown and see some good friends. So had a good time. Didn't want to come back.
Guys, I'll tell you, I love the 4th of July. It's my favorite holiday. But I just want to give a shout out to my neighbors who are still shooting off fireworks like 11:30 last night. Like, I hate you. I'm just like, we've had 4 days of this. We can move on. It's a work day. But yeah, nonetheless, still heard sparklers and
all in favor of July 4th being a permanent holiday on a Monday. Have a nice 3-day weekend. I think that's fantastic. So, Adam, how was your 4th of July, man?
It was good. Just spending time with family. I was kind of surprised at how many fireworks shows were on the actual 4th of July. I would have thought a lot more would have been on Saturday or Sunday, considering, the late night and everything. But most people were sticking to the original day. But yeah, I definitely agree. 3-day holiday, not a bad setup. So
we went. I think we saw fireworks Saturday and Sunday, and then we didn't even do anything last night. So Corbin, I know, keeping an eye on your store, you guys had a jam-packed weekend full of stuff.
Yeah, fireworks Friday night, pretty good show. We attempted to go see a drone show on Sunday night. Didn't make it to the drones. Saw a video of the drones later. Glad I didn't make it to the drones. But with all the fire danger and stuff out here, like there are some cities that just don't do fireworks anymore. So drone shows are in.
So they're disappointing. They're not cool.
I only saw a video of it. Maybe it was better in person, but of what I saw, I'm glad that I didn't stay the whole time.
Huh.
That's all I'm going to say. No disrespect to Castle Pines, Colorado.
It sounds like it would be cool. Maybe in time it'll get to be
a good idea. If you're going to do a drone show, I need like 10,000 drones. Like I need to be like really impressed.
Yeah,
like, give me some stuff
absolutely.
I've never seen before.
Yeah. Let's get the military involved.
That's right.
So from something that sounds like a good idea to college football expanding again, since we last met, USC and UCLA have joined the Big Ten. I assume Lincoln Riley is going with them. We'll see if he's still the coach at USC by then. It's a weird week, another weird week in college football where you just feel like, man, this is not the sport that we grew up, following as young kids, and especially not for generations older than us. And it feels even more and more like, wow, just money runs everything. It's a rudderless ship, college football. No one's in charge. Everyone's out to get their money. And I don't blame USC and UCLA for doing it, just like I don't blame OU and Texas for moving to the SEC a year ago. But it really is changing the foundation of the sport. And to me, I think that's kind of sad. I think that's the general consensus I'm hearing from a lot of people. But where do you guys fall as far as the direction of college football and whether you're excited for it?
I'm actually pretty open to it. I don't know about you, Tyler, but one thing I think I've learned since the shakeup of what we knew of the Big 12 kind of growing up is that everything kind of lands on its feet. I don't think we miss the old Big 12. I don't think we miss A&M, Colorado, and Nebraska, Missouri being in the Big 12. I think it kind of just played out the way it was supposed to, and you get used to the new norm. I don't see – this is a bit different, like seeing UCLA and USC going to play Ohio State and Michigan. That's stranger than I think I probably ever could imagine. But guys, I think this stuff kind of just shuffles out the way it's supposed to.
Yeah, change is not always good. I think that we're kind of early in the stage, Adam, as far as being able to forecast how this is going to play out. I know that from a fan perspective, it's got to be very, very tough for a lot of those fan bases in Big Ten country. Adding 2 teams from the West Coast doesn't necessarily play too much of a factor for the fan bases of UCLA and USC, because we all know that the care level is much, much lower at those 2 fan bases compared to the Big Ten and the SEC fan bases that we're a part of now. But I'm not opposed to it. I think that if there's one thing that we've seen over the last 18 months, starting out with OU and Texas going to the SEC, now USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten, it's just kind of a free-for-all right now. It doesn't feel like anybody's in charge. TV networks, money, sponsorships. It's becoming a money driven. It's almost kind of following the professional model to where it's less about maybe the student athlete, less about the individual universities, and it's what can we do to generate the most amount of revenue to where each university can benefit the most as possible. So I'm very interested to see how this is going to play out now that we're essentially going to have two super conferences. What's gonna happen to the ACC? Does the SEC and the Big Ten try to dip in and take Clemson, Florida State, Miami? What's Notre Dame going to do as an independent? How's the Big 12 going to survive? Or I guess I should say, how's the Pac-12 going to survive? Losing USC and UCLA, kind of the two major logos in that conference in that part of the country. What's it going to look like? Is the Big 12 going to poach 5 or 6 of those schools? So a lot remains to be seen. I'm not for it. I'm not against it. I'm just kind of waiting to see in mode right now.
The one thing that I hate is that it's the contraction of the amount of teams that matter at this point. Right now with the Power Five, you've got about 65 teams that matter. They have a place at the table, whether the Pac-12 makes more or less money than the SEC. It's in the same neighborhood. And I think this move just takes it down to about 40 schools that are, the ones that matter. And it relegates the Kansas States and the Iowa States and the Washington States of the world into group of 5 status, essentially. And maybe they'll have an opportunity to make an expanded playoff, but their revenues are going to be, there's going to be a significant gulf between those schools and what SEC and Big Ten schools are making. And it makes me wonder if fans of those teams may start tuning out or saying we don't care as much, just like, group of 5 schools are smaller fan bases. And does that in turn make the national audience for college football really just the Southeast and the Midwest? And, some of those other fans, stop caring as much because what are they playing for really? 5th place in a expanded playoff. It just makes me wonder that we're turning off a lot of fans to college football.
Is it that different than what those fan bases are right now?
Possibly, but like the gulf between Kansas State and Alabama right now is, it's wide, but it's going to get even bigger than it is right now. So I just think it further and further distances them.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm seeing yet either.
Yeah, income level, because the Big Ten, for example, they're looking at if they get the $1 billion that they're expecting for their new media rights deal, they're going to pay out each school $100 million a year. That's going to be easily double what Big 12 teams will make. It'll be double what, maybe even triple what ACC teams are making. So it just further, and you look at, for example, the Big 10 versus a MAC school right now, like totally not in the same stratosphere, and it's just going to relegate some of those Big 12 remaining schools into more of a relationship that the Big 10 has to the MAC schools right now, just by a money standpoint and what they're able to produce and fund and put into their programs.
Yeah, but let's be honest. Like, there's some football programs that should not be in a Power 5 conference, and they're just fortunate enough that they are. I mean, like, Kansas has been losing to MAC schools for a while, and yet they're still in the Big 12 conference. So I don't think it's the worst thing in the world that some of these programs maybe are put where they're supposed to. And maybe that sounds mean and harsh and things like that, and I understand it. But, like, is Rutgers going to – I don't know. Like, there's just some teams in there that probably don't belong with the big guys, and, like, that's okay.
So are you going to kick Rutgers and Vanderbilt and even like Kentucky, for example? Traditionally, Kentucky's pretty bad. Are you kicking them out?
They're fortunate enough to be in the right conference at the right time, unfortunately.
But why keep them around? They're not huge money-making schools for you. Kick them out, bring in other guys.
Because that's just never going to happen. You're not going to kick people out of the conference. That would be a bad precedent.
Do you guys, to kind of transition here, do you guys think that we're on the verge of college football, that specific sport within collegiate athletics, branching out from the NCAA and, removing themselves from being, from being underneath the umbrella of that? Because to me, you're essentially getting to a point, which I guess, you could kind of make the claim with college basketball with a handful of schools, with everything being money driven. It kind of feels like at this point right now with college football, it's going towards where you've got maybe 20 teams that have a realistic chance to win a national championship. You've got probably 10 to 15 teams that are carrying the sport, which is not unlike anything that we've seen, over the last 2 to 3 decades, but it just kind of feels more and more like what you were saying, Adam. You are further eliminating the amount of teams that are relevant, whether it's from a competition standpoint, from a revenue standpoint, from a fan base interaction standpoint. It just kind of feels like now that we're going towards these super conferences, the Big Ten, the SEC, they're going to start picking off the premier fan bases, the premier programs in college football, and then you're going to have just the rest of them are going to be left out to dry, like your Arizonas, your Arizona States, Washington States, etc. So it's very interesting. I'm glad that there's smarter people that are figuring this out, because I sure as heck can't.
I don't feel like it's going to be that significant. Maybe I'm greatly mistaken, but if you look at like what basically the Pac-12 would have to shift to, I think like per school revenue goes from like 41 to 30. And granted, yes, $11 million is a significant amount. And yes, these other conferences continuing to build these TV contracts that we're going to lap these, the smaller conferences now. But if you're a Big 12 and you can now put together a 20-team conference that, yes, maybe all of the main TV viewing areas are relatively small in the grand scheme of things, but if you can put together enough of them for the revenue to make sense, you stand a fighting chance. And so that's where you look at like a Big 12, Pac-12 alliance, which is a really funny word to use right now. Maybe they stand a chance in this grand scheme of things. They're not going to be making as much, but can they make enough to be relevant once every 5 years? Probably. There can be a team or two that can come up there and fight the battle. We do all. I think all of us agree the playoff at some point will expand. I don't think these conferences would be doing this if they didn't think it was going to. So I don't know. I'm not ready to just completely write off the ship that this is that significant of a difference than what we're currently dealing with at the moment.
Adam, let's talk. Or go ahead.
Yeah, well, let's go ahead and actually talk about that. I know we had a little bit lower in the lineup, but since it's already top of mind here, the Big 12. There's some announcements on Twitter, I guess, or reporters saying on Twitter that the Big 12 is going after 6 Pac-12 schools, basically your Arizona State, Utah, Colorado, Washington, Oregon. Leaves Oregon State, Washington State, Stanford, and Cal out in the dark, which to me I kind of find funny because Stanford and Cal were the two ones that really didn't want to partner with any of the Big 12 schools, and they might get shut out by them. But I think that's a decent conference. I love that it gives you, a lot of time zones there, and so helps keep some of the regional rivalries together. Adds Utah, BYU, and the Holy War as a Big 12 game. Colorado, I think, is a good matchup for K-State. I know those fans like to go out to those games, but does that somewhat is it somewhat competitive with the Big Ten and what the SEC has? I mean, I think it's decent. It's not great, but it's okay, in my opinion.
I think it kind of keeps the
Big 12 has now, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think it kind of keeps the Big 12 where they're at right now in the pecking order. You've got the SEC, the Big 10, ACC and Big 12 are kind of, jockeying for third position, year in and year out. But I think if you're the new Big 12 commissioner, I think that with the Pac-12 kind of falling apart right now, losing their 2 biggest logos to the Big 10, I think that it makes all the sense in the world to try to go out there, especially with the Pac-12, renegotiating their TV rights right now. This is kind of a prime position for, the Big 12 to kind of go in there and try to grab 5 or 6 of those SEC or those Pac-12 schools. Because, guys, let's face it, losing OU and Texas to the SEC, the Big 12 right now really doesn't have a major brand or a blue blood, which they're not necessarily gaining any of that by poaching, in Oregon, Washington, the Arizona schools, Colorado, Utah, but you do raise the level of competition compared to what you have right now in the conference with bringing in UCF, Houston, Cincinnati, so on and so forth. So, if the Big 12, I think, is going to survive and, even thrive in a sense, I think that it does make all the sense in the world for them to go out there and poach 5 or 6 of those Pac-12 schools, because it does kind of get you into that West Coast market. It allows you to keep some of those rivalries, Adam, and I think it's good for college football if the Big 12 can expand.
We're all in agreement Oregon and Washington are not coming to the Big 12, correct?
I mean,
what's the alternative?
They would much rather be in the Big Ten. Now, does the Big Ten want them? I don't know yet. I think the Big Ten is holding on Notre Dame. They want Notre Dame, and they will do whatever it takes to keep a spot open for them. So you're in an interesting position if you're the Big Ten or the SEC at this point, because you can take on teams, or you can basically say, you know what, you're dead. You're going to a Group of 5 conference at this point. So they can say, yeah, we'll take Oregon. They bring value, or no, we're just going to kill them by essentially not giving them an invite. And it doesn't matter whether they're, going to steal a few recruits here or there. They'll slowly die out.
Yeah. I just don't see that as a likely scenario that Oregon and Washington, even if they don't get in the Big Ten, I don't see them going to the Big 12. I just don't. It doesn't make sense. And I guess you could make the same argument for why USC and UCLA are going to the Big Ten. Doesn't make sense, but at least that's like a significant TV market. And it kind of like, I don't know. I just don't see that, guys. I see Arizona and Arizona State being option one. I see CU and Utah being option two. And then a distant third option, I see Oregon and Washington.
I just think, and again, not to beat a dead horse, I just think it's funny as hell. Lincoln ran from Oklahoma because he didn't want to play in the SEC. Fast forward 6 months later, okay, here you go. Here's Ohio State, Michigan State, and Wisconsin every single year, and sprinkling a few of those others. So,
you know that Purdue is the new K-State to him. He's going to lose in West Lafayette like every time he goes out there in like mid-November. So
yeah.
My question to you, Adam, though, is if Big Ten takes on Notre Dame, then who? You have to have one more.
Yeah, I could
Oregon.
See if I was the Big Ten, I would really want UNC and UVA, and we'll talk about them in a second. I don't know how the ACC, how they get out of that necessarily. I'm sure they could find some ways, but I would be looking east more than I'd be looking west. What are they at 16 right now? Is that right? Yeah, they're at 16. They added 2.
Yes,
so
16.
Yeah, you get Notre Dame. Maybe you take West Virginia. I don't know. They don't really make sense in the Big Ten, though. So,
well, Adam, with the Big Ten expanding right now, taking away the two powerhouse brands from the Pac-12. Well, if you're, as this relates to OU and Texas being part of the SEC, if you're Greg Sankey right now, what do you do? Do you do anything in response to this? Do you try to poach, a Clemson, a Florida State, a Miami? Do you try to grow and expand the SEC even more so? Or are you happy with what you've got right now? Because it kind of feels like we're getting to a point where you're going to have these 2 super conferences, and you're just going to start growing the list of teams. And kind of, the SEC already has a huge presence in Florida. So Florida State and Miami, those are 2 teams that you can easily add. And Clemson, being just an hour away from Atlanta, it just kind of makes all the sense in the world if you're Greg Sankey and you choose to go down this path. Those are 3 really, really good schools that you could add that would just, make the SEC brand even bigger and better.
Don't you already have those markets, though?
Yeah, I don't see why
you do
want more Florida schools, really. I mean, Florida State, is Florida State really that desirable right now?
No, but given the right coach, and if they can figure out a way to turn things around, then absolutely you would want Florida State to be in your conference. Same with Miami, and same with what Dabo's doing at Clemson, I believe.
But the same thing occurs, though. Like, it's exactly going back to what we mentioned. If you're the SEC and you take a Clemson and you leave Florida State and Miami, those 2 schools will not be the same moving forward. So it's not like they're eventually going to. It's up to the SEC if those schools remain relevant or not, basically.
Right.
Yeah. And with Clemson, yeah, they're good right now, and they do fill an 80,000 seat stadium, but they do not have national appeal. They don't have a national audience. So you're not really adding a whole lot there. Greenville is, a great college football media market, but you do have some of that with South Carolina already. With Florida, you have the University of Florida, obviously. Florida State, I think, and Miami both draw some national audiences, but they're going to come in. If they are good in the SEC, they're going to start stealing, more recruits from SEC schools. So if I'm the SEC, I'm thinking I'd probably much rather have UNC and one of the Virginia schools, simply because that continues to expand your territory north. And I think those are both fertile recruiting grounds that I would much rather have. So again, the SEC is in a position where they can say, we will choose to let you live or die. And they can say that to Miami and Florida State and Clemson, say, you know what, screw you. We're leaving you in your conference to die.
I guess I'm thinking about it in terms of recruiting. And it's like, the SEC brand, that's national, that gets them in all 50 states. So I really don't see the impact of having North Carolina and, Virginia Tech. I don't see how those 3 schools outweigh the pros of bringing in, more of the premier programs, outside of Clemson, Florida State and Miami. There's a lot of rich tradition within those schools, a lot of success over the years. So I think that, if I'm Greg Sankey, I would much rather have Clemson, Florida, or Florida State and Miami as opposed to the 2 Virginia schools in North Carolina.
Traditionally, Clemson is not that good, though. They've had a good
I said that.
But prior to that, they're not Florida State or Miami tradition-wise.
Okay,
yeah,
so let's have the data talk here a little bit. Looking at the 2020 rankings for college football viewership based on ESPN's numbers, Birmingham, Alabama is 1, New Orleans is 2, Richmond is 3, Louisville 4. ACC team. Interesting. Don't think just for football you don't take them, but if viewership is the conversation, maybe. But are you already in that area? It's the same argument, I guess, for Florida. Yeah. Greenville, South Carolina, Knoxville, Greensboro, Charlotte, Memphis, Columbus, Ohio. Not any that stick out.
Richmond is interesting. That seems really high. And so
it's deep in the heart of SEC.
Richmond, Virginia?
It didn't actually specify.
Richwood?
I wouldn't think so. Hang on. Let me check.
Yeah. I guess I look at that and I think, yes, you can get into all 50 states if you're recruiting for the SEC. You're already getting into the state of Florida. You're already getting into the state of South Carolina. You're definitely getting into Virginia and North Carolina if you want to, but strengthen that presence and say, hey, we're kind of safeguarding this from the Big Ten with Maryland and what they've got going on and saying, hey, here's new territory for us. We're taking over. You pick up some good basketball schools in the process and you say, you know what, we don't care that Florida State is a tradition-rich program. We don't need that territory. We will just effectively end their program's life by not inviting them.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess the problem that I have with your argument, Adam, is that, claiming, we don't want Clemson because they're not a big enough brand. They don't, they've only recently been good. I mean, Clemson to me right now with Dabo Swinney, with the outlook, I think that if you put an SEC logo on Clemson's uniform, I think that only strengthens that program. Yeah. I think it only makes it much more of a valuable asset. Whereas you look at a program like North Carolina, yeah, that's a basketball school first and foremost. North Carolina, they rank, to me, below Virginia Tech, below Clemson in terms of the value that they bring as a football program. So, I mean, if we're being honest, football is the driving force in this expansion talk. So I would have Clemson ranked ahead of North Carolina, and I would have Clemson ranked ahead of Virginia Tech. You can make a case, I think, for Virginia Tech if you did want to, dive into that state and, kind of, take hold of that market. In the state of Virginia Tech, the Hokies, that's a really good one that you would want to have joined. But I just don't see the appeal of Virginia or North Carolina at this point.
Yeah, I will say,
just face it, North Carolina hasn't been relevant to football other than Mac Brown becoming the head coach. I didn't give two shits about North Carolina football until Mac Brown stepped foot on campus.
But you also have to consider, just as easily as they could say, well, we will kill Clemson by leaving them stranded on an island, you can make North Carolina considerably better at football by just inviting them to the SEC. So it's not as easy as it is to end Clemson's program in a sense, because UNC has to be committed to being good at football and fan support and everything. But there's a path there as well. Like, their boat will rise in the process.
And at least with Virginia, you'd have access then to the DC market, which I do think is important.
Yeah.
So there's at least an automatic, high viewing city that is in that market that's going to have quite a bit of a fan base. So, guys, it can go a million different directions. I guess a question that kind of shifting directions here, what happens with a school like Oklahoma State? Do they provide any value to an SEC if it expands?
So here I am kind of in the same boat as UNC. I think Oklahoma State's far better in a lot of different athletic programs, probably overall as a whole better athletically than what UNC is. Basketball, no, but football, baseball, softball is really good right now. Wrestling's traditionally very good. I guess they wouldn't go to the SEC, but golf, as a whole, Oklahoma State's a very good athletic program. Their fan support is not, what it should be. And I know a lot of OU fans just want to look down and disdain and say, oh, OU has nothing to win. It's a lose-lose scenario when they play OSU, but that is a great rivalry game. There are some fun and exciting games that happen in that rivalry, and it matters in the state of Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. It matters when you work and live next to Oklahoma State fans. And I think that's what makes college football so great, is that you have your buddies that are constantly annoying you all off season, and then you actually get to go talk smack to them after the game. And when OU steps away from that rivalry, you will have some Texas fans. You'll have some A&M fans around. Arkansas, I don't see as much of a presence in Oklahoma, maybe not here in Oklahoma City, but I'm sure in Tulsa there are, but there's not as many rivalry opportunities that can match what Bedlam is. And so I think that would be a great addition. I think OU fans should be okay with that. I mean, we're in the same conference right now. We're beating them out for pretty much almost any recruit that we want. We're beating them pretty much every year for the most part. So I don't think that we should be, scared or, saying, hey, we want to give them a piece of the pie too, because we're already beating them at that game as it is.
Well, and I hate to give little brother credit, but I mean, let's give credit where credit's due. Look at some of the other schools in the SEC, just in terms of football. I mean, starting strictly with Vanderbilt. Are you telling me that the SEC wouldn't much rather have Oklahoma State in that conference compared to Vanderbilt? I mean, Mike Gundy, what he's done.
I disagree.
You disagree?
Mm-hmm.
In terms
why?
Nashville. Okay, I mean, yeah, Nashville, Stillwater. Yeah, you're
not only for the city's sake, but simply the viewer's sake.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Nashville's more of a volunteer town than a Commodore's town.
Agreed, but I still don't think you'd want to lose it. I wouldn't trade that over Stillwater.
Yeah. I guess just in terms of product in the football field, I would much rather, and I think you could probably pull a large majority of the people that would feel the same way. I would much rather watch, A&M versus A&M versus OSU, OU versus Oklahoma State, compared to Oklahoma traveling to take on Vanderbilt. I mean, we make fun of Kansas in the Big 12. Unless you're a Texas fan, Vanderbilt's kind of the same, gets the same level of mockery from other SEC fan bases. So I'm totally in favor. If the SEC does choose to expand pretty heavily, maybe pick up 4, 5, 6 more teams, I would be in favor of OSU joining the party.
I'm against it. Adam, I love everything you said from a fan perspective, but rivalries and fan drama, conferences don't give a damn. It's about money, who can bring what to the table. And let's be honest, guys, we're praising Oklahoma State and they do have a better program than a Vanderbilt. But what have they done in this conference on the football level in the past decade? They haven't done much.
They came up about 6 inches short a year ago.
6 inches short or 3 yards short or 50 yards short, it's a loss. And that's unfortunately the way sports are played. And so I don't think it makes sense. As a SEC conference, you're gaining really nothing as far as revenue, eyes on television sets. You're not getting a damn thing from adding a school like Oklahoma State. Unfortunately, that's just the truth.
Well, and that's, I think, a large part of that is because you've already got the premier program in this state and a blue button in Oklahoma. So you've already dipped your hand into the state of Oklahoma and captured that viewership audience. Oklahoma State, I don't think really is going to add much value in that. So it's a good argument to have.
Let me ask you guys, because I do want to Adam, do you have something on that one?
I mean, just the mere fact that it draws so much ire from OU fans that OSU could make it to the SEC is, I think, the exact reason why we should want that, because it is a good rivalry. And the Bedlam itself is a very marketable game. Like, yeah, the rest of the OSU schedule isn't going to do much for TV, but having Bedlam is worth something. I agree overall. Like, I think it's a very long shot that OSU would be in the SEC.
I think, considering the SEC schedule it's about to come, I don't mind having a Vanderbilt in there from time to time, just to give you a week off. But one thing, kind of before we completely transition, Big Ten, SEC, obviously Big Ten adding USC, UCLA, maybe more. SEC adding Oklahoma, Texas. Who has won the conference alignment shakeup here between those two conferences?
SEC.
Yeah, I think it's pretty simple. The only rivalry you get with USC, UCLA being added to the Big Ten is USC and UCLA. And I don't even think they have a rivalry name. Whereas with the SEC, you get the Red River Shootout. You get the renewal of Texas versus Texas A&M. You get Texas and Arkansas back, potentially a new one with OU and Arkansas.
OU,
Alabama. It's so much bigger. Every game with OU versus Bama, Georgia, Florida, LSU, whoever. Same with Texas. Those are huge games. USC will be a good one for the Big Ten, but UCLA does almost nothing.
Well, and just think about this in terms of, relevancy in the last 10 to 20 years. I mean, how many big-time matchups, whether it's national championships, premier bowl games, non-conference games, OU's gone up against Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Texas A&M, so on and so forth. So I really think
Tennessee.
Even Tennessee. So I think that the SEC, I don't think it's even close. Outside of the Big Ten, getting into the largest TV market in the country in Los Angeles, you're not really gaining too much because of the fact that UCLA is the one that's dragging this whole deal down. I think that getting USC is a huge deal if Lincoln Riley can turn that thing around. But I just don't see the draw of having UCLA. It kind of feels like USC did what Oklahoma didn't do in terms of bringing a little brother to the party.
So I would rank this just as far as brand. I'm not talking about success on the field. I'm not like talking about championships. It's Texas, USC, Oklahoma, UCLA. And there's a significant gap between 3 and 4. Are you all in agreement of that as far as who won the biggest brands in that order?
Say that order again.
Texas, USC, OU, UCLA.
As much as it hurts me to say it, I think I have to agree with that. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Take the blinders off.
Yeah. You take the blinders off and take away the recency bias.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's a bigger brand. It's a bigger school.
USC.
Well, I mean, let's be honest.
When
USC had it rolling with Pete Carroll, Leinart, Reggie Bush, I mean, that was they had things going and LA was booming. So I think that's fair to say. God, I hate saying it though.
The other thing about this is that OU and Texas are much more natural fits in the SEC. The fan bases are much more similar to them. USC and UCLA. USC is kind of like wait and see, like typical big city, sports team. Just wait and see if they're good and then show up. Mm-hmm. But those fan bases don't really have much in common with Purdue or Iowa or just any Big Ten school, really.
Talk about a culture clash.
Yeah, like Iowa fans are great. Like they have a good program. It's not great, but they pack out the stadium and it's a tough place to play. Purdue fans, they show up. They don't really have a whole lot to hang their hat on. But USC and UCLA like barely put anybody in the stadium.
You know who may benefit from this most is UCLA concession revenue. Because the Big Ten's going to travel there every freaking weekend.
They have tons of alumni already there that are probably pumped to have a game to go to that's really close.
Correct. So instead of playing in like a half-fourth full stadium every home game, it's going to be like what OU did a few years ago, if not more. Like an Ohio State is going to fill the Rose Bowl.
Absolutely.
And so instead of playing a Cal, a Stanford, a Washington State, and it's just like nobody shows up at all, at least then I guess you have away team fans invading your stadium. So
yeah, and think about the teams
through the roof.
Yeah, think about the Big Ten teams that don't normally play in the Rose Bowl, like Michigan State or Purdue or Iowa. Iowa's been there a couple times recently, but those fans will think playing UCLA in the Rose Bowl in the middle of October is just as cool as playing there on January 1st. So a lot of those fans will look forward to it.
It's a destination trip. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Same reason why we all went.